Once we've put an equation in slope-intercept form, we can use that equation to graph a line without having to really solve for points on the line. So the first thing you're going to want to do is graph the y-intercept. Use the slope to determine where the next point is, and then connect those 2 points. So I have y equals 4x minus 3. So my slope is 4, and my y-intercept is negative 3. I have to take that negative with me because remember it's supposed to be y equals mx plus b. Now, how do I write 4 as a fraction? Well, I can put it over 1. I know this is going to have positive slope, so it's going to be going uphill. I just kind of am visualizing that to make sure when I graph the line, I do graph it correctly. So I'm going to graph y equals negative 3, and then I'm going to use my slope to go up 4 over 1. So my rise was 4, my run was 1. And I'm going to go ahead and connect these 2 points with a straight line. Beautiful. Okay, let's do this again, but now I have y equals negative 2x plus 4. So my slope is negative 2/3, and my y-intercept is 4. So here I'm graphing my y-intercept. So fancy. And I've got negative slopes. Remember, this is going to look like it's going downhill. So because I have negative slope, I go down 2 and then over 3. Negative. So it's down 2 over 3. Oh, look, I just found my x-intercept. That's exciting. What is it? It's when x is 6, y is 0. Very cool. So let's go ahead and graph this line. Beautiful. Now, why don't we go ahead and graph these horizontal and vertical lines, right? They're a little bit different. Okay, they don't really have a slope listed, right? But we know that the line x equals negative 2 is going to be a vertical line at x equals negative 2. So it's every single point where x is negative 2, right? Every single point on this line would satisfy this equation. For the graph y equals 5, I'm going to attempt to change color. Beautiful. We'll do that in blue. So I have y equals 5, so I go to where y is 5. And my line with the slope of 0, it's going to be parallel to my x-axis, right? And every single point on this equation on this line satisfies this equation. One thing I want to talk about first is I talked about it a little bit, parallel lines, right? I said my y-axis, y equals 5, is parallel to the x-axis. I also said x equals negative 2 is parallel to the y-axis. Parallel meaning these 2 lines are never going to cross. 2 lines are parallel if they have the same slope. And that slope could be positive, that slope could be negative, it could be 0, such as if it was a y equals b looking line, or it could be undefined if it was a vertical line. So let's determine whether the following are parallel lines. Remember, parallel lines have the same slope. So I already know the slope here is 3/2. I need to know the slope of this first equation. So I'm going to go ahead and solve for y. So I have 2y equals 3x minus 6. I divide both sides by 2. I have y equals 3/2 x minus 3. So I get a slope of 3/2. So because the slope of both of these is the same, these lines are parallel. Oh, and I spelled it right earlier. Go me. Parallel. It's also important to note that if 2 lines are perpendicular, the product meaning multiply, the product of their slopes is -1, i.e. the slopes are negative reciprocals. What does that mean? Okay, so let's say I have the fraction 2/3. The reciprocal of that is it flipped. So its reciprocal would be 3/2. If I have the negative reciprocal and I multiply these together, I get -6/6, which is -1. So slopes with a line, 2 lines with a slope of 2/3 and one with a slope of -3/2 would be perpendicular. So why don't I check and see if the following lines are perpendicular? In order to do that, I need to solve for y. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. Y equals 3/2 minus 3. Now I need to solve for y over here. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. 3y equals -2x minus 6 divided by 3. That means y equals -2/3 x minus 2. So now I have my two slopes, so let me multiply them together. I have 3/2 times -2/3. You can see I'm not really creative with examples, am I? That gives me -6/6, which is -1. So these lines are perpendicular, meaning they intersect at a 90-degree angle. I didn't say that, did I? Okay, perpendicular lines intersect at a 90-degree angle. So like my x-axis and my y-axis, those are perpendicular even though the slopes of their lines isn't -1. If I want to find the slope of a perpendicular line, of a line perpendicular to another, I could use the formula p equals -1/m. So let's say I have y equals 4x minus 3, an example we've used before. If I want to find a line perpendicular to that, I could find its slope. This is the slope of the perpendicular line, by taking p over -1 and plugging in my slope, which is 4. So any line with a slope of -1/4 would be perpendicular to y equals 4x minus 3. The point slope form of a non-vertical line is written like this. It's y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. This is a way for us to determine the slope of a line when we're only given a point, to determine the equation for the line when we're only given a point on the line and the line slope. So why don't we go ahead and work through a couple examples of this. So let's write the point slope form of the equation of a line with slope m equals 2 that passes through the point when x is -1, y is 3. So the equation, point slope form equation is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and substitute in. I have y minus y1, which is 3, equals my slope 2 times x minus x1, which is -1. That means I have y minus 3 equals 2 times x plus 1. I'm going to go ahead and distribute this 2, right? So that leaves me with 2x plus 2, y minus 3. I'm going to add 3 to both sides. That leaves me with y equals 2x plus 5. So the equation of a line with slope 2 passing through the point when x is -1, y is 3 is y equals 2x plus 5. Now, let's try this again, but this time I have slope that's a fraction. Nobody likes working with fractions, but we could use the practice, right? It's never a bad thing. So I'm going to take y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. I'm going to go ahead and substitute. Y minus 2 equals -1/2 times x minus 5. And then I need to go ahead and distribute that negative. That gives me -1/2 x. A -1/2 times a -5 gives me a +5 halves. Y minus 2 is still on the left. Again, I'm trying to get y by itself, so I need to add 2 to both sides. So that means I have y equals -1/2 x plus 2 plus 5 halves. Now I need to combine like terms. So I could do that by writing 2 as a fraction over 2. So I'm going to have y equals -1/2 x plus 2 as a fraction with a denominator of 2 would be 4 over 2, right? Because 4 divided by 2 is 2, plus 5 halves. When we're adding fractions, friendly reminder, we combine the numerators and leave the denominators alone. So I have 9 halves. So my final equation is negative 1/2 x plus 9 halves. What would the equation of a line with undefined slope through the point when x is 3, y is negative 3 be? Well, what does the equation look like when it has undefined slope? When it has undefined slope, it's a vertical line. So you know it's going to be the line x equals something, right? It's the equation for a vertical line. Well, what's x equal at this point? Well, this would be the line x equals 3. Just if I wanted the equation of a line through this point with 0 slope through when x is 3, y is negative 3, because that equation looks like y equals a constant, right? If we have 0 slope, it's y equals some constant. It would be y equals negative 3. And if that same example is on the next slide, I'm sorry, I must have forgotten. Oh, see, I already answered my question. Again, it is y equals negative 3. Now I want to find the equation of a line parallel to 2x plus 3y equals 6 that goes through the point negative 3, negative 6. So in this case, I'm not given a slope. But I know that I want the line to be parallel to this line. Well, when two lines are parallel, they have the same slope. So let's go ahead and solve this equation for y. I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. 3y equals negative 2x plus 6. I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by 3. So I have y equals negative 2/3 x plus 2. So I have a slope now of negative 2/3. So I can use the point slope form of an equation. I've got y minus y1. Here's my x1 and my y1 equals m times x minus x1. That gives me y minus negative 6 equals negative 2/3 times x minus a negative 3. Simplifying, I have y plus 6 equals negative 2/3 x plus 3. Now, negative 2/3 x plus 3 in parentheses, right? I just got rid of our double negatives. Now I need to distribute. So I have y plus 6 equals negative 2/3 x. If I have negative 2/3 times 3, that gives me negative 6/3. But I can go ahead and simplify that to negative 2. Now to get y by itself, I subtract 6 from both sides. So the equation for the line parallel to the line given through the point requested is negative 2/3 x minus 8.